To a rough legal week for Trump. This week, judges handed down a string of losses and major setbacks as the barrage of lawsuits against his agenda continue. So let's review. Early this week, judges blocking Elon Musk's department from accessing sensitive data in 2 agencies and blocking ICE arrests in religious spaces for some groups. But a ban on the Associated Press from covering Trump was upheld. Trump losing 2 separate rulings over freezing foreign aid funds, but a last-minute intervention by SCOTUS allowed the freeze to continue. The administration also dealt losses over an attempted refugee ban, funding to hospitals offering gender-affirming care, and an extension granted to reinstate a watchdog head that Trump seeks to fire. The Supreme Court is set to rule on that case soon. However, a judge did side with Trump over the firings of dozens of intelligence officers. But another judge blocked the mass firings of probationary officers across the government. A Musk employee now ordered to testify against the Trump administration in a union lawsuit. And today, an appeals court maintaining an injunction against Trump's ban on birthright citizenship. I get it. That's a lot. But the key takeaway here is the following. Trump is clearly losing more than he is winning. Joining me now for more, Leah Littman, University of Michigan law professor and the host of the Strict Scrutiny podcast. Leah, it's good to see you. I need to know, in your opinion, what's up with all these legal losses? Is the rule of law holding the line?
The rule of law is temporarily holding the line, but I think we should also be realistic about what these losses indicate. One is they underscore just how outlandish some of the administration's arguments are. They are truly reaching right to the ends of the earth as far as the scope of presidential power, and courts are rightly trying to force them to hew to the line that our Constitution delineates. But second, we should also recognize that courts are not stopping everything. Even in some of the USAID freeze cases you mentioned, where plaintiffs prevailed, the administration has yet to actually pay out a lot of the money. So there are still cases and still things that have been going on that while courts are trying to do something, in some ways the administration is moving too quickly, too chaotically to wind back the clock in some instances.
So, Leah, procedure is always really important when it comes to the law. So sometimes you can't even get to the substance until you deal with the procedure. What are the remedies available to Trump's administration as a result of these losses? Meaning, are we going to see these make it to the Supreme Court on an expedited basis, or are we going to see these cases kind of play out on their normal speed?
I think they are absolutely going to try to get to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible. And that's in part because, the Trump administration recognizes that they have some friends on the Supreme Court. He appointed 3 of the justices in the current Republican supermajority. And in the New York Times reporting on the origins of DOJ today, they indicated that the people who were orchestrating DOJ felt emboldened by the fact that they thought this Supreme Court would share their wild, extreme vision of executive power. A lot of these cases are still in the lower courts, and the Trump administration is likely to rush up to the Supreme Court as quickly as they can because that court is going to be more favorable to them than the average trial court judge that they are having these cases heard before.
Fascinating lawsuit just filed today in the United States District Court in the District of Columbia. It's the Democratic Party suing Trump, asserting that he violated federal election law, saying, quote, the assertion is incompatible with nearly a century's worth of Supreme Court precedent, blessing Congress's authority to insulate certain agencies and officials from day-to-day control by the president. I know this lawsuit just dropped, but Leah, do you have any initial thoughts about this litigation?
Yeah, so I think this case is about a core issue that both the Republican justices on the Supreme Court and Republican presidents have showed a lot of interest in, and that is whether presidents must have the power to fire all agency heads. The idea that Congress can create independent expert agencies is something that goes back more than a century and has laid the foundation for many of the expert agencies that we rely on to do health, safety, welfare, economic regulation that makes our day-to-day lives work. And that is the principle that the Trump administration is taking aim at. And that is also something that Project 2025 called on the Trump administration to do, to overrule the key case that established independent agencies. This is also something that at least 2 Supreme Court Justices Thomas and Gorsuch, have already indicated they are willing to do. So I think this lawsuit, while it absolutely represents a key statement and affirmation of existing law and law that is, correct for many important reasons, I am not confident that once this issue gets to the Supreme Court, they are actually going to uphold existing precedent rather than radically refashion the law and hand more power over to Donald Trump.
Leah, I did want to follow up with you because what I always find to be very interesting, because as a trial lawyer, we always look at the evidence in a case. I find it to be interesting that there's so much litigation that the discovery process is about to launch in a lot of these cases, which means we're going to be seeing internal communications. We're going to be seeing the turning over of documents, maybe even depositions of key players in this, including somebody like Elon Musk. I wanted to ask you your thoughts about whether or not there's going to be a way for the Trump administration to try to stonewall the production of any of this discovery.
I think it is going to be very important for these courts to be able to develop the factual record. We saw over the last week that government lawyers were either unable or unwilling to identify who the administrator of DOJ was. Yeah. And I think discovery, collecting evidence could be really important to establishing how DOJ developed and what the administration is actually doing behind closed doors. That being said, I also have no doubt that the Trump administration is going to try to stop any meaningful collection of evidence. If you recall, back during the first Trump administration, during a challenge to their attempts to add a citizenship question to the census, a trial court ordered some discovery and collection of depositions from some federal officials. And the administration went off to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible, asking them to pause that evidence collection. And so I think that's what the administration is going to try to do again. Whether they are able to be successful in all of these cases simultaneously remains to be seen. But I at least am hoping that we are going to be able to see some factual development about what is happening to our government behind closed doors and so quickly.